Hello and welcome to another absolutely lovely day here in beautiful Nova Scotia. I'm in the greenhouse again. Unfortunately, I wanted to do some filming outside in the garden today, but it's a bit on the breezy side. So to do what I'm actually going to do, it's good to film in here. No wind, it's just a bit on the old warm side. So I did a video the other day about me stringing up my tomatoes, taking them off the bamboo canes that they were on and starting to flop over, and getting them nice and straight up on the string. And one of my subscribers asked me, Leek Eyes, I'm not sure whether that's Miss, Mrs or Mr. I have an idea it could be Miss or Mrs, because normally blokes don't really put eyes in their names unless it's Snake Eyes or something mean like that. But anyway, Leek Eyes asked me to do a video, if I could do a video, on how to prune the tomatoes. So I thought, oh, I might as well do that video. Anything to help my subscribers, within reason, obviously. So how to prune your tomatoes for sort of peak growing of tomatoes, really, isn't it? And so as you can see here, I have my tomatoes growing straight up this string, and hopefully going nearly as high as the ceiling. And I keep it to one stem. And to do that, you have to prune lots of different side shoots off your tomato bush, because it will try to grow lots of side branches off itself, because it's a vining plant and that's what its natural habit is to do. And as you can see with this one I'm doing an experiment with, it has literally started to grow lots of different side shoots and branches off the branches, and it forms a big bushy habit, and if you let it go it will just take over all over the place. But I wanted to see in that particular one if there is truth in, you know, you want to keep it to this nice straight habit and let it concentrate all its energies in producing fruit in the flowers, or if I let it go off all over the place, will it produce me more fruit that way? But that's just an experiment. The accepted wisdom amongst a lot of gardeners is for indeterminate tomatoes, that is tomatoes that will keep growing as long as it's warm enough. The best way to grow those tomatoes is in a nice straight upright like that with no side shoots. For determinate tomatoes, that is tomatoes that just have a set height that they will grow to and a set amount of tomatoes that they will produce, you can let it grow side shoots, because at the end of the day it's just got that set amount that it's going to grow anyway. So let's have a look at what I want to do with my tomatoes. So obviously when I first planted my tomato, it's got all these hairy bits on its stem, as you can see even here, and you plant your tomato as deep as possible up to its sort of first set of leaves, because it will grow roots out of those sort of hairy bits, and you want a nice, obviously big root growth, because then that will support more of a plant. So that's the first thing I did when I planted this tomato. And now I let it start to grow up this cane here, and I want it to stay in the single stem like I showed you, but it's got a habit of wanting to, and we're going to switch now quickly to another tomato where it's nice and easy to see. It's got a habit of producing side shoots. So let's have a quick look at that tomato where it's easy to see one of these side shoots. Right, as we can see here, we have a tomato plant that I'm growing up this piece of string. Could easily be a bamboo cane, and here is its main stem, and here are the leaves, the branches of the leaves that are coming out either side, and in between the main stem and this leaf is a side branch, or as we call them, sucker. Now I don't want these suckers, because that will just produce another branch off, and then eventually it will produce flowers, etc. But I want this tomato plant to put all its energy into growing these flowers and just this one stem and the tomatoes off it. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that those suckers don't grow. So all I had to do was just snap that off. Sometimes you forget, and there's a great big one that turns up, as you can see here. I completely missed this one, and you know, I'd rather cut that off with my secateurs rather than try and snap it off. But all the way up, what I want to do is cut off these side branches to make sure that I have one single stem going all the way up my string to as high as I want to grow it. And we'll talk about that a bit more in a moment, but let's get back to the big boys. So another thing we have to think about with our tomatoes is their proneness to disease. They get all sorts of diseases picked up from the soil itself, picked up from moisture, spores, etc. So they can be quite prone to disease. So one of the things we do to counteract that is to cut off a lot of the lower leaves so that there's no chance of any of the leaves actually coming into contact with the ground, or when you water it, dirt splashing up onto the leaves, etc., which, you know, is quite easy to do. So a good thing to do is remove the sort of lower leaves. Once your tomato plant starts to get a good height, remove the lower leaves a good foot up from the ground, and then there's no real chance of splash ups onto the leaves, you know, causing spores from any sorts of horrible things that may be about, or you're lessening the chance anyway. So that is a good practice. So I make sure that all of these lower branches or lower leaves, etc., are cut back, so we're nice and bare here. And it's also good practice, so again we want to produce a good airflow inside. If we've got a lot of tomatoes together in a group like I have here, I want to be able to promote good airflow inside here. So it's a good idea for me to remove lots of leaves that are on the inside here that are preventing sort of air flowing around, and again that moist air causing disease, etc. So any sort of touching leaves from one tomato plant to the other, you know, on the inside, cut them back. And again, like I said, just keep it nice and airy as much as is possible on the inside of your tomato plants, so that we're not promoting any of that horrible diseases, etc. So there's that. Now, as your tomato plants start to get taller, they're going to produce their flowers, and then hopefully they're going to produce their tomatoes. We've got a little one just coming here. Some of the other ones haven't taken, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But this fruit, it's a fruit, isn't it? This fruit needs sunshine. So fruit on the inside, as you can see here, is not getting a lot of sunshine. So as the plants start to grow, we want to start to remove leaves that are blocking out the sun on these inside tomatoes. And again, that is also sort of promoting a bit of airflow, but we're trying to get the sun as much as is possible on these tomatoes. So just always cut off the leaves up to the lowest truss of tomatoes. So do that anyway. And as we get further up, that will mean you're cutting the leaves off further and further up. And once we've got about 6 trusses of tomatoes, that's about probably around the sort of how many you're going to be producing in the season anyway. So then as you remove tomatoes, because they've ripened, you'll just cut the leaves up to the next set of tomatoes, and then when they've ripened, to the next set, to the next set, all the way up. So you're not wasting energy on the leaves. You're putting all the plant is putting all its energy into the tomatoes, and the sun is getting to the tomatoes as well. So that is another good thing. Just start to cut down the leaves as much as is possible. So let's look at, so I'm in a greenhouse here, and I'm not going to get as many pollinators in here as much as is possible. I'm not going to get as many pollinators in here as I would outside. So I still want to promote my flowers to be pollinated. And the one good thing about tomato plants and pepper plants, etc., they have both male and female sex organs on the same flower. So that is good. So that what happens is when a bee or a hoverfly or whatever a pollinating insect comes in, it sort of vibrates the plant, and then the male parts, which are at the top of the flower, loosen off their the pollen, and that goes down to fertilise the bottom part of the flower. And then that turns into a tomato. And you'll know that that's pollinated by the fact that the flower will close and then obviously turn into a fruit. But if it's not pollinated, the flower will just fall off. So in the greenhouse here, we know that I'm not getting as many pollinators. So there is a way that I can pollinate the plant, or help to pollinate the plant itself. So let's have a look at that. So even though my tomato plants are all in the greenhouse, I leave the door of the greenhouse open all day. So I'm hoping to get pollinators in all the time. And as you can see here, this plant has germinated nicely a lot of tomatoes here. So I am getting some pollinators in, or whether it's me. But a way of ensuring that you're getting a better pollination rate anyway is to do a bit of self-pollinating. So like I said, the male and female sex organs of the tomato plant are all on the same flower, and you know, basically when the bee or whatever it is comes in, gets pollen, vibrates, and that sort of vibration makes the pollen come down onto the female sex part, and we get germination. So a way of doing it yourself is just literally vibrating, going around the plants and vibrating the leaves yourself, and you're sort of mimicking that same operation of the bee coming in, and as it comes in, its wings start to vibrate the plant itself. And a good actual better way to do this is if you've got an old electric toothbrush. That is really good, putting that by, and that really sort of gets that vibration. But this works. So that is a good way of self-pollinating your tomato plants. Just pop around there when you're doing a bit of the watering, when you're checking the tomatoes, just give it a quick vibrate. There we go. Right, something else I want to show you actually. Let's just move this down here. Right, we have a flower truss here, as you can see. Give that a little go just for the last ones. We've got some tomatoes forming. Well, the tomatoes, the flowers are here, but after this last flower here, it started to produce some sort of growth again. And if you leave this unchecked, it will grow into another branch, which you don't want. So the best thing to do is pinch it out, and then you've just got the truss of tomatoes. So you want to make sure that it's not growing branches off its actual trusses of flowers, because again, you're wasting energy into another part of the plant that you don't want to grow. Now this would all be all very well, you know, having lots of branches going off everywhere and lots of more flowers if we had a long growing season in the northern hemisphere. You know, if you're down in the tropics and it's warm all the time, then the tomato plant can grow for that quite a bit longer and the fruit can ripen for that little bit longer and you're all right. But up here in Nova Scotia, obviously I'm going to be starting getting my first frosts possibly at the end of September, and in the greenhouse, you know, might go a little bit longer, but the light levels are starting to drop then, so your tomatoes that are up the top here, or maybe on 5 or 6 different branches that didn't set until sort of the middle of August, late August, they're not going to ripen in time. So that's what we're doing, concentrating all the time our resources in this, probably about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe on these inside green, 8 sets of flower trusses at one time. If I harvested some tomatoes at the bottom here and I've only got 5 sets of trusses of flowers, I might let some more grow. Just depends on what time of the year it is. Anyway, so that's what we're talking about, the flower going and creating more branches. So what else do we want to look at? We've looked at pruning up to a certain level, about a foot up. We have looked at pruning back leaves on the inside so that they're not touching each other, so that we're creating a nice bit of open air on the inside. Pruning back leaves so that they're not shading the tomatoes that are growing, and cutting back this branch coming off the lower part of this this flower truss. There's something else I want to talk about and I can't remember. Hang on. So one other thing is, and I just sort of alluded to it with the last frost, I probably won't let any more fruit set after the middle of August. So any plant is growing all the way up the top there, any fruit that start wanting to set up there after the middle of August, say so 6 weeks from your last frost, I would say, I wouldn't let any fruit set. And like I said, so what I will do there is I will just cut it off at the top there after any fruit from the middle of August for me, so that no more fruit can grow. And then again, I'm cutting off all the side shoots or anything else that wants to set flowers, etc. So all of the energy will be going into the fruit that's on here. So that is about that. I'm sure there's something else, but I can't think off the top of my head what it is. But if you pay, you know, attention to those specific, I'll say rules, guidelines, it will help you produce much more tomatoes than you would any other way. You're giving your tomato plant the best chance it can to produce lots and lots of juicy tomatoes for your, you know, whether it be paste tomatoes for your spaghetti bolognese sauces, or, you know, your cherry tomatoes to go in your salads, and your slices for your sandwiches, all these different ones. It's all about the same if you're growing indeterminate. And if you're growing determinate, again, I would pay attention to the splash up and keeping the leaves off the ground, etc. But you ain't got to worry so much about growing it in one line. But I reckon after that, job's definitely a good one, and I'm rather hot. See you later.